Black CEO asked to give up VIP seat for white passenger. One call, and the entire crew gets fired. It was supposed to be a routine flight, but for the black CEO, it quickly turned into a moment of unforgettable injustice. As she settled into her VIP seat, ready to relax after a long day of meetings, a flight attendant approached her with an unexpected request. The attendant, with a tone that was both insistent and dismissive, asked her to give up her seat for a white passenger, citing company policy. The request was not only rude but deeply disrespectful, as the CEO had paid for the premium seat, with no intention of giving it up. Rather than react impulsively, she remained calm but knew exactly what needed to be done. With one phone call to the airline's corporate office, she made her displeasure known. Moments later, the entire crew was removed from the flight, and the CEO was left to ponder the powerful lesson in standing up for oneself. The incident would reverberate far beyond that flight, showing the world that no one, no matter their position, should ever be asked to compromise their dignity. If you found Amara's story inspiring, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Extra Story Life for more incredible tales of courage, strength, and triumph. Comment below and let us know what you think. What would you have done in her place? We love hearing from you, so make sure to share your thoughts and join the conversation. Your support means the world to us. Amara Lawson had always been a woman who believed in earning everything she had, and her success as the CEO of a global tech company was the result of years of hard work, sacrifice, and determination. She had built her company from the ground up, shattering barriers and paving the way for women of color in the tech world. Despite her accomplishments, Amara preferred to maintain a low profile whenever she traveled. She didn't want to be treated differently because of her position. When she boarded flights, she did so like any other businesswoman, dressed in a smart suit, carrying her briefcase and keeping to herself. On this particular flight, Amara was on her way to a high-stakes business meeting, a deal that could further expand her company's reach and set her up for even greater success. She had earned her first-class seat, paying for it just like any other passenger, and was looking forward to some much-needed peace and quiet during the long journey ahead. The flight began calmly, with Amara settling into her seat and opening a book to prepare for the long hours of strategy and planning. Everything seemed normal until the flight attendant approached her. The attendant, a young woman who looked nervous, greeted Amara with an uneasy smile before making an odd request. "Excuse me, ma'am," she began hesitantly, "but we need you to move from your seat." Amara, initially confused, politely responded, "I have a confirmed VIP seat in first class. I don't understand why I need to move." The flight attendant, still looking uncomfortable, explained that there was a priority passenger who now needed the seat, a white man, and Amara would need to vacate it to accommodate him. Amara was taken aback. She had paid for this seat and had no reason to believe it was anyone else's to take. She had been assigned this seat when she booked her ticket, and there was no issue with the seat's validity. Yet here she was, being asked to give it up for an unnamed passenger who happened to have more priority in the flight crew's eyes. Amara's unease began to rise as she realized what was happening. Despite the confusion, she remained composed. "I've paid for this seat and I am traveling on business," she explained calmly but firmly. "I was assigned this seat when I booked my ticket. I don't understand why I'm being asked to move." The flight attendant hesitated, looking back toward the front of the cabin before repeating her request. "I'm really sorry, ma'am, but you'll need to give up your seat. The passenger needs to be accommodated." Amara could feel the tension building as she tried to process what was happening. It was not a technical error or an overbooking. There was no legitimate reason for her to be asked to move. Only an arbitrary, unjustified demand to vacate the seat she had been assigned. It didn't make sense. The discomfort that had initially been a quiet unease began to grow into a rising sense of frustration. She had been treated as an equal throughout her life, fighting against the odds, working her way up the corporate ladder, and now she was being asked to give up the one thing she had earned for herself. Amara was well aware of the biases that often exist in society, especially toward people of color. But this was different. This wasn't just about being uncomfortable. It was about being dismissed, undermined, and treated as if she didn't deserve the very thing she had worked for. She stared at the flight attendant, who was still standing awkwardly waiting for a response. The tension between them was palpable. Amara knew that she had every right to stay in her seat, yet the flight attendant was insistent. Something about the entire situation didn't sit right with her. It wasn't just the request to move. It was the way it was being handled, the underlying assumption that she would simply comply without questioning it. Amara took a deep breath, fighting back the frustration that was threatening to surface. She had dealt with similar situations in her career before, but this felt different. It felt personal. She had spent years building her company, pushing through every obstacle that came her way, and now, in a moment of what should have been a simple business trip, she was being treated as though she didn't belong in a seat she had earned. Amara's mind raced, considering her options. She could leave quietly, avoid a scene, and let it go. But something inside her refused to let it slide. She wasn't just fighting for her seat, she was fighting for every person who had ever been made to feel inferior simply because of who they were. With a calm but firm voice, Amara spoke again. "I'm not moving," she said. "This is my seat, and I expect to be treated with respect. If there's a problem, I'll be happy to speak with someone higher up." She could see the flight attendants, hesitation and uncertainty, and it was clear that the situation had spiraled beyond her control. Amara was no longer just a passenger asking for a seat. She was a businesswoman standing up for her rights. The tension in the cabin remained thick, but Amara, her dignity intact, had made a decision. She wasn't backing down. Amara had long been accustomed to the subtle undertones of discrimination, having fought through the barriers that often come with being a successful black woman in industries dominated by men and individuals of other races. She had encountered countless challenges throughout her career, but this felt different. This wasn't just another business meeting where her intelligence and capabilities would be questioned. This was about her right to exist in a space she had paid for, earned, and belonged in. As she sat in her first-class seat preparing for what was meant to be a routine flight, she felt a sense of unease creeping over her, and that unease quickly turned into frustration. The flight attendant's request for her to move wasn't just a request for a simple seat swap. It was an assertion of power, an implication that Amara didn't belong in that space. There was no explanation offered, no apology for the inconvenience, only a clear discomfort from the attendant, who seemed to be acting out of protocol, but without any valid justification. Amara was being asked to vacate her seat, which she had rightfully earned through her hard work and dedication to her company. The lack of respect she felt for her position and her presence made her feel small, as though her accomplishments and her right to enjoy a simple flight were somehow secondary to the needs of another passenger. As Amara sat there, she reflected on all the times she had chosen not to rock the boat, not to make a scene, for fear of being seen as overly confrontational. But this wasn't just about a seat. This was about the dignity she had earned over years of sacrifice and struggle. She had fought too hard to be in this position to let it be undermined by a thoughtless request. So instead of doing what many would have done and accepting the request without protest, Amara made a conscious decision to stand her ground. She calmly told the attendant that she had a right to stay where she was. She didn't need to explain herself further. She had already paid for the seat, and it was hers by every right. The attendant's expression faltered for a moment, as if she hadn't expected any resistance, but despite her hesitation, she pressed on with the request, repeating that the important passenger needed the seat. The attendant's tone grew more insistent, but the message was clear. Amara's comfort Dignity and rights didn't matter in the face of someone else's perceived priority. The language the flight attendant used, important passenger, made it seem like Amara was less important, a mere inconvenience. Amara could feel the frustration rising in her, but she remained steady. She wasn't going to let this go unnoticed. She calmly responded, "I'm the CEO of a company. I've earned this seat just like anyone else." The words hung in the air, but they weren't just words. They were a declaration. She wasn't backing down. She had earned her success and her place in the world, and no one, especially not a flight attendant, was going to make her feel like she didn't belong. As soon as Amara spoke those words, the attendant's demeanor shifted. The earlier confidence she had in her request evaporated, replaced by nervous uncertainty. The attendant didn't know how to respond. She was likely caught between the protocol she had been taught and the realization that she was challenging someone with more authority than she had initially understood. With a faltering excuse, the attendant stepped away, likely to consult with someone higher up, and Amara was left in her seat. The tension in the air was thick as passengers around her began to notice the interaction. The murmurs from other first class passengers slowly grew, and Amara could feel the weight of their attention. She wasn't just standing up for herself anymore. The eyes of those around her were on her, silently waiting for the resolution. Amara's patience was wearing thin, but she kept her composure, holding her ground as she waited for the resolution. It wasn't just about a simple seat anymore. It was about respect. It was about dignity. And it was about being seen as an equal, not as someone who could be dismissed or moved at the whim of others. The more she thought about it, the more she realized that this wasn't a small issue. It was a reflection of the biases that permeate society, and Amara was in a unique position to address it head-on. She had spent years fighting to create a space for herself in an industry that often overlooked her, and this moment, while small in the grand scheme of things, felt like yet another test of whether she would allow herself to be pushed aside or if she would stand firm. As the minutes stretched on, Amara remained calm, knowing that no matter what the outcome, she had already won. She had stood up for herself, her rights, and her dignity. It wasn't just about the seat. It was about making a statement to everyone on that plane and to anyone who might ever feel that they don't belong in a space they've earned. The minutes dragged on, and with each passing second, Amara's frustration grew. She had been polite and calm, trying to resolve the situation with dignity, but the longer it stretched, the clearer it became that this wasn't a simple misunderstanding. It was becoming a deliberate effort to control her, to treat her like she didn't matter. When the flight attendant returned, she wasn't alone this time. She had brought 2 security guards with her. Their presence only escalated the tension. While the guards remained polite, their demeanor was firm, and it was obvious they had already been briefed to handle the situation quickly and decisively, no questions asked. They stood at attention, looking at Amara as if she were the problem. With no hesitation, they quickly and forcefully instructed her to leave her seat, asserting that she needed to comply with their orders. It was clear now that the airline's staff had decided she was the problem, not the absurdity of the request to vacate her seat. They had no idea who she was or the significance of her presence on the flight, and to them, she was just another passenger creating trouble. But Amara, though feeling the weight of the disrespect, remained composed. She wasn't going to let this turn into a confrontation, but the situation was quickly escalating beyond what was acceptable. She had every right to stay in her seat, yet here she was, being asked to leave because of an arbitrary decision made by people who seemed determined to undermine her. The injustice of it all cut deep. It wasn't just about the seat. It was about the lack of respect for her as a person. It was about the way her position as a black woman in a powerful role was being disregarded. She had worked her entire life to build her reputation and business, only to be treated as if she didn't deserve the same basic rights and respect as anyone else. As the guards continued to insist that she move, Amara's sense of resolve strengthened. She wasn't going to let them get away with this. She had a choice to make. She could back down, accept their treatment, and move quietly, or she could stand her ground and make it clear that this kind of behavior would not be tolerated. The decision was clear to her. Amara reached for her phone, her fingers shaking slightly, but her mind focused. She knew what she needed to do. She dialed her lawyer's number, her voice steady but firm as she waited for the call to connect. When the lawyer picked up, Amara didn't waste time. She quickly explained the situation, making it clear that she was being treated unfairly. She didn't raise her voice or let her emotions get the best of her. She simply stated the facts. She explained that she had been asked to vacate her seat without any valid reason, and that she was now being threatened with forceful removal by the security guards, who didn't even know her identity. Amara's voice carried authority as she spoke, and it was clear from the way she conveyed the details of the situation that she wasn't going to back down. She had earned that seat, and she wasn't going to let anyone, no matter their position, tell her otherwise. "I want to speak to the airline's head office now," she said, her voice steady and unyielding. Within moments, she was connected to the executive team. They were caught off guard at first, but Amara didn't let that faze her. She explained everything: how she had been treated, how she had been asked to give up her seat for no legitimate reason, and how the security guards had been called to forcibly remove her. She made it clear that the treatment she was receiving was unacceptable. She didn't raise her voice, but her words left no room for misunderstanding. She wasn't asking for an apology. She was demanding respect. "This is not how you treat your paying customers, let alone someone who is a black woman in a position of power," she said, the words dripping with the weight of years of experience. She didn't care if they didn't know who she was. She demanded the respect she deserved. She ended the call with one final statement: "If this situation is not resolved immediately, I will never fly with your airline again, and I will make sure everyone knows why." Amara knew that her call to the executive team was a turning point. She wasn't just defending herself, she was sending a message. She would not be silenced or overlooked. She would not be made to feel small just because she was in a position of power. Amara had earned her success, and no one was going to take that away from her, not even a flight attendant or a couple of security guards.